Okay, let's be real for a second here. If you look at the headlines for the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years.
Yeah, at least a decade.
Right. The narrative around artificial intelligence has really just been screaming one thing: speed.
Always speed.
It's always about automation, right?
Mhm.
Efficiency. Churning out content just faster than ever before. Feels like the whole world is yelling at you to, do more, do it faster, sleep less.
It creates this distinct feeling of like a treadmill that's constantly speeding up, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
The assumption is always that the ultimate goal of any new technology is just to increase the sheer volume of output. More widgets, more emails, more slides, more code.
And honestly, it's exhausting just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting for today's deep dive. We found something that totally challenges that whole do more work in less time grind set.
We did. It completely flips the script.
It suggests that if we're just using AI to run faster on that treadmill, we're missing the point entirely.
We are looking at a fascinating piece of work today by Hervé Ngaté. He's an assistant professor and a subject matter expert in psycholinguistics, specifically looking at AI in instructional design. And the piece is titled From Content Creation to Cognitive Cultivation.
Cognitive cultivation. I actually really love that phrase. It implies growth, patience. Almost like gardening for the brain,
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
It sounds so much more peaceful than content generation, which honestly just sounds like a noisy factory floor.
Well, it's a very deliberate choice of words on his part.
Right.
Ngaté is essentially arguing that we are shifting from a task-saturated economy where we are all just drowning in to-do lists to a well-being-centered one.
Which sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But, also a little utopian, maybe even a little too good to be true.
It does sound like a tall order.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out what on earth that actually looks like in practice for you, the listener. Because if the goal isn't just efficiency, if the goal is human flourishing, which is another beautiful phrase from the text, how does that change what you do when you sit down at your desk on a Tuesday morning with, say, 1,000 unread emails?
That is the big question. And to answer it, we really have to start by looking at the specific problem Ngaté identifies with how knowledge work is currently structured. He talks about the cognitive offloading revolution.
Okay, let's unpack that. Cognitive offloading. Because when I hear offloading, I initially think, great, I can just be lazy.
Right.
Like I can offload my work to the machine, go grab a coffee and put my feet up. But that's not really what he's getting at, is it?
Not at all. To understand this, we need to get a little technical for just a moment and talk about cognitive load theory.
Ooh, okay. Lay some theory on us.
So in any learning or complex working environment, your brain has a limited amount of processing power. It's like a bucket.
A bucket, okay.
It can only hold so much water at once. Now, some of that processing power goes to the actual complex problem you're trying to solve. That's called intrinsic load. That's the good stuff. That's the actual thinking.
Right.
But a huge chunk of that bucket often gets filled by extraneous load.
Extraneous load being the stuff that doesn't actually help you solve the problem, the extra junk.
Exactly. It's the friction. It's the noise. Ngaté points out that modern professionals, especially in fields like education or instructional design, but really any corporate job, they are bogged down by routine, repetitive, and administratively burdensome tasks.
Oh man, I know this pain intimately. We're talking about like formatting slides so all the font sizes match perfectly.
Yes.
Checking curriculum alignment codes, or drafting those endless emails just to schedule a meeting to plan another meeting.
Or synthesizing meeting notes, transcribing interviews, cleaning up data in spreadsheets. It's the grunt work.
The grunt work. And this feels like that takes up, what, 80% of the day sometimes?
Yeah. Often, yes. And the consequence isn't just that you're busy. It leads directly to decision fatigue.
Because your bucket is full of the wrong stuff.
Exactly. Think about it. If your brain burns 40% of its daily fuel just figuring out the conditional formatting of a budget spreadsheet,
which I have definitely done,
you literally do not have the bandwidth left for deep strategic thinking. You are arriving at the real work already exhausted.
It's like running a marathon just to get to the starting line of your actual job. By the time the race starts, you just want to lie down.
That's a perfect analogy. So Ngaté introduces this concept of cognitive offloading. It isn't about laziness. It's a strategic redistribution of labor. He frames this as an organizational intervention.
An organizational intervention. That sounds pretty serious. So it's not just, here's a cool new app, have fun.
Yo.
It's changing how the work gets done structurally.
Correct. Think about an instructional designer, which is the specific example Ngaté uses in the text. Traditionally, they might spend hours grading simple comprehension checks or mapping learning objectives to state standards.
Line by line, code by code.
Exactly, it's tedious. If AI takes that over, if it handles that extraneous load, what do the humans actually get in return?
Well, they get the one thing you can't buy, time.
Time. But specifically, time for what? This is where Ngaté is critical. If you use that saved time just to do more grunt work,
Or to just answer 50 more emails.
right. If you do that, you haven't solved anything. You've just spun the hamster wheel faster.
You haven't escaped the treadmill.
He argues this gives us time for reflective practice, for mentorship, and for ethical deliberation.
That is a huge shift in mindset. Instead of spending 3 hours formatting the deck, you spend 3 hours actually thinking about whether the strategy in the deck is the right thing to do in the first place.
Yes.
Or you spend that time mentoring a junior employee who really needs guidance.
Exactly. Ngaté frames this as the gateway to psychological resilience. If you aren't drowning in admin, you have the capacity to actually engage with your work and your colleagues meaningfully. You have the mental space to step back and say, wait, why are we doing it this way?
Which feels like such a luxury right now for most people, but he's saying it should be the standard.
It should be the absolute baseline.
Okay, this actually leads us perfectly into the next big topic. Because usually, when people talk about AI taking over tasks, the immediate fear is that we're all going to end up as these lonely, isolated Wall-E types.
Staring at screens all day.
Exactly. Never talking to another human being because the machine just does everything for us.
The dystopian social isolation narrative, it's a very common fear. The logic goes, if the robot does all the work, do I still need to talk to you?
But Ngaté seems to think the opposite. He thinks this actually brings us closer together.
He does. He presents a strong counter-narrative. He argues that human-AI collaboration actually increases opportunities for authentic human interaction.
Okay, I'm going to need you to walk me through that. How does having a robot do my work make me more connected to people? Because intuitively, it feels like it adds a layer of tech between us.
Well, let's look at the division of labor he proposes. The AI takes on the role of content delivery, informational scaffolding, maybe simulating an immersive environment for learning. It builds the structure, it handles the logistics, it schedules the calls, it organizes the data.
So if we use a theater analogy, the AI builds the set, turns on the lights, and prints the programs.
Yes, I love that. And because the AI has built the set, the human, whether that's the instructor, the manager, the leader, is totally liberated to focus on what Ngaté calls Socratic dialogue.
The Socratic dialogue.
Right. They can focus on cultivating learner autonomy or mediating cross-cultural communication, things that require nuance.
So because I'm not stressing about the data entry or the scheduling, I can actually sit down, look you in the eye, and ask, hey, do you really understand this concept? How are you actually feeling about this project?
Precisely.
Yeah.
You aren't rushing through the interaction just to get back to your spreadsheet. There's a phrase in the text that I think is absolutely crucial here. Ngaté calls it empathy as a productivity multiplier.
Empathy as a productivity multiplier. Wow. That's going on a sticky note right here on my monitor. But, okay, play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
Isn't empathy usually considered a soft skill? Like something nice to have, warm and fuzzy, but not really about the bottom line or productivity?
That is the old way of thinking. That is strictly an industrial mindset. In this new economy where AI can handle the logic, the data processing, the information retrieval, the human competitive advantage becomes the ability to interpret emotional cues.
Right.
It becomes about fostering trust and encouraging persistence. These are things algorithms simply cannot do.
Yeah, I've seen ChatGPT write a condolence email or a congratulatory note. It's technically correct. The grammar is flawless, but it doesn't actually care.
Exactly.
It can't read the room. It doesn't know if I need a push to work harder or if I need a break because I'm burning out.
And that reading the room is the productivity multiplier. Think about it. If you can keep a team motivated because you actually have the time to listen to them and understand their roadblocks, that team produces way more value than a team that is burnt out but happens to have really great spreadsheets.
Right.
The emotional intelligence transitions from being a soft skill to becoming a core organizational competency.
Going back to that theater analogy we touched on, if the AI is the stage crew, the human is the director and the lead actor connecting with the audience.
It essentially takes the robot out of the human. We stop acting like machines processing data because the actual machines do that way better now, and we start acting like, Well, people, we become what he calls the mediators of meaning.
Mediators of meaning. I
Yeah.
really like that. Okay, so we've got the emotional side covered. We're nicer to each other because we aren't so incredibly stressed out by admin.
Right.
But I want to pivot to the intellectual side because this source isn't just about feelings. It's about thinking, too.
It is. And this brings us to the third major theme, co-reasoning. This is where Ngaté talks about AI not just as a task doer, but as a cognitive amplifier.
Cognitive amplifier. It suggests that we are basically turning up the volume on our own intelligence. But how does that work practically? Is it just me asking the AI questions and it giving me answers?
It's much more dynamic than that. Ngaté describes a co-reasoning environment. Imagine a dialectic, a back-and-forth exchange. The AI presents possibilities, scenarios, or models based on vast data, and the human evaluates the implications of those models. Think about Bloom's taxonomy.
Oh, wow. Flashbacks to Psych 101. That's the pyramid of learning, right? Rote memorization at the bottom, creation at the top.
That's the one. So at the bottom, you have remembering and understanding, recalling facts, explaining basic ideas. AI is incredible in that. It can retrieve information instantly. It essentially has the whole internet in its database.
Right. It beats me at trivia night every single time.
Exactly. And because the AI handles the bottom of the pyramid so effortlessly, it pushes the human up the pyramid toward the higher levels: analysis, evaluation, and creation.
So we get to skip the rote memorization, the sort of flashcard phase of working, and go straight to the high-level strategy.
In a sense, yes. Let's use the specific example Ngaté gives of the instructional designer again, because it really illustrates this dynamic well. Traditionally, a designer might spend days or even weeks just coming up with one solid curriculum strategy.
Because they have to build it all manually.
Right. They have one idea, they build it out, they hope it works.
You invest all your time in plan A because you literally don't have time to build a plan B.
Exactly. Now, with a cognitive amplifier, they can use AI to model 5 different strategies in a matter of minutes. They can simulate learner outcomes for each one. They can ask, if we use this specific method, how might a struggling student react? If we use that method, how does it scale across 1,000 employees? What are the edge cases?
So they aren't asking the AI, tell me what to do. They're saying, show me all the possibilities so I can make an informed choice.
Yes. The human is absolutely not outsourcing the decision. Ngaté says they are expanding their epistemic horizon.
Epistemic horizon. That is a solid phrase. Sounds a bit like sci-fi. Break that down for us.
Your epistemic horizon is simply the limit of what you can currently know or see. It's the edge of your knowledge.
Okay.
By using AI as a scenario simulator, you are seeing much further than you could on your own. You're seeing potential pitfalls, ethical issues, or creative angles that you literally wouldn't have the time or the perspective to generate alone.
It's like having a dedicated team of experts in your pocket debating you all day. Hey, did you think about this? What about that?
Ideally, yes. Ngaté actually calls the AI an ethical mirror in this context.
An ethical mirror. That's interesting. Usually, people worry that AI is inherently unethical or at least biased.
Well, the AI acts as a mirror because it reflects back the consequences of your ideas. Because it can show you the potential outcomes, including negative downstream outcomes you hadn't considered. It forces you to confront the ethical implications of your work before you deploy it.
So it actually makes the job harder in a way.
How so?
Because now I can't use ignorance as an excuse. I can't launch a project and say, oh, I didn't know that negative side effect could happen. I have the information right there. Now I have to actively judge it.
That is a key insight. It removes the excuse of ignorance. It allows for truly evidence-informed leadership. You aren't stuck in the weeds trying to find the information. You already have the information. Now the burden is entirely on your judgment.
That is a massive shift. It really does change the definition of what it means to be good at your job. It's no longer about how much you know. It's about how you decide.
It fundamentally changes the metric of value, which leads us right into the next major point in the text: redefining productivity.
This is the part that scares some managers, I think. Because if I'm not being measured by how many slides I make or how many emails I send, the old widget counting method, what am I actually being measured on?
That is the million-dollar question for organizations right now. The old metric was simple: output per unit of time.
How many reports did you write today?
Right? It's easy to put on a graph. It's easy to track.
Which makes zero sense now because I can click a button and have an AI write 50 reports in a minute. If my boss wants volume, I can give them infinite volume.
Exactly. Volume is no longer a differentiator. If volume is infinite and practically free, value has to come from somewhere else. Ngaté calls this new metric high-quality productivity.
High-quality productivity. That sounds great in a corporate mission statement, but what are the KPIs for that? How do you actually measure it?
It's characterized by things like contextual relevance, ethical alignment, stakeholder sensitivity, and long-term sustainability.
Okay, those are way harder to measure than words per minute.
Much harder. It's no longer, did you write the report? It's, does this report actually make sense for this specific client in this specific cultural context? And is it ethically sound? Does it actually solve the problem long term or just put a Band-Aid on it?
There's a quote in the source that really stuck with me on this point. Ngaté writes, "The question is no longer how much we produce, but how well we think."
How well we think. That is the new gold standard. It demands a total shift in organizational design. Institutions have to become more learner-centered, more culturally responsive. Productivity becomes a function of judgment quality rather than task throughput.
I feel like a lot of professionals really need to hear that. Judgment quality over task throughput. Stop counting the widgets. Start looking at the wisdom. But, and this is a big but, this puts a lot of pressure on the human to be, well, wise.
It does. It requires us to really step up intellectually and emotionally. But here is the catch. You can't be wise if you are burnt out.
Sure.
You can't have high judgment quality if your brain is totally fried from administrative tasks and decision fatigue.
Which brings us to the final, and perhaps most surprising, pillar of Ngaté's argument. Self-care.
Yes, and we need to be clear. This is a radical redefinition of self-care.
Right, because usually when a company talks about self-care, they mean, here's a subscription to a meditation app, please don't quit. Or, go do yoga on your lunch break.
Exactly. It's viewed entirely as an individual responsibility. If you're burnt out, it's because you didn't do enough breathing exercises over the weekend.
It privatizes the stress.
Yes, it privatizes the stress. It says, the system is perfectly fine. You just need to cope with it better.
Which is infuriating. It's like telling someone trapped in a burning building to just practice mindfulness.
That's spot on. Ngaté flips this completely. He argues that well-being is an emergent property of organizational design.
Meaning the system itself should create the well-being.
Exactly. If the system is designed correctly, using AI to reduce that cognitive load, to remove that administrative friction we talked about in the very beginning, then the conditions for work-life balance and professional autonomy naturally emerge.
So it's not about giving people superficial perks. It's about structurally removing the garbage work that makes them miserable in the first place.
Ideally, yes. The logic is that if AI handles the drudgery, the human is left with the meaningful, relational, creative work. And meaningful work is, by its very nature, less burning out than drudgery.
That makes total sense. I mean, I'm way more tired after 4 hours of mindless data entry than I am after 4 hours of a really good, intense brainstorming session with a team.
Right.
One completely drains me and the other actually energizes me.
Exactly. And Ngaté takes it a step further here. He says this isn't just about efficiency or making employees slightly happier. It's a moral responsibility. Ensuring technology contributes to human dignity rather than eroding it.
Human dignity, that's a really high bar for a tech implementation. We usually just talk about ROI, not dignity.
But maybe it's the only bar that matters in the long run. If we build systems that just make us work faster but feel more miserable, we failed. We've just built a faster treadmill.
So let's recap this journey, because we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the trap of speed, the idea that AI is just a turbo button for the hamster wheel.
But through Ngaté's work, we've seen that the real potential is cognitive cultivation. We talked about the cognitive offloading revolution, giving the extraneous load to the AI so we can actually reclaim our mental bandwidth.
We talked about the paradox of connection, using that reclaimed time not to isolate ourselves behind screens, but to deepen human connection, using empathy as a productivity multiplier, which I still think is the absolute coolest phrase of the day.
It's a very good one. We also discussed co-reasoning, using AI as a cognitive amplifier and an ethical mirror to climb up Bloom's taxonomy, to expand our epistemic horizons and see possibilities we just couldn't see before.
And finally, redefining productivity itself, moving away from how much to how well, and seeing well-being as a natural outcome of a well-designed system, not just a generic corporate perk you get once a year.
It's a very hopeful vision, honestly. It moves us away from that pervasive fear of being replaced and toward a world where we're actually, well, more human. It affirms that our true value lies in how we care, how we collaborate, and how we think, not just what we make.
It's almost like the AI is forcing us to become better humans because that's the only job left.
In a way, yes. It clears the clutter so we can focus on what actually matters.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with something to chew on. Something that Ngaté touches on regarding human intentionality.
Right, because if AI is the engine that drives efficiency, and it is a remarkably powerful engine, it raises a critical question for every single one of us.
Are we prepared to be the steering wheel?
Exactly. If the machine handles the what and the how fast, are you cultivating the skills to handle the why and the who for?
Because if you take your hands off the wheel, the engine is just going to keep running. It's going to go incredibly fast. And who knows where it'll end up.
The destination is entirely up to us. We have to be the ones driving the intent.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for thinking with us today.
Until next time.